Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here this morning. Davos, Bill, come on up. I want to introduce, my name is Dan Primack, business editor at Axios, and this is Bill Ford, chairman and CEO of General Atlantic.
Great. Hey,
Thanks
Dan,
for
good to
coming.
see you.
So,
Thanks for having me.
Bill, let's start here. There's been so much talk just over the last couple of days in Davos about the AI cycle, and we're kind of in year 3 of this AI cycle. Is it an AI hype cycle or just an AI tech cycle?
Well, let's just step back for a moment, and this is the 5th big tech cycle of my career. I think about the PC cycle of the 80s, the internet cycle of the 90s, the mobile cycle of the zeros, and then the cloud cycle of the 2010s, and now we have AI, which might be the biggest of all of them. And the first thing to think about is that these cycles play out over decades and not years, and so the opportunity that's going to be created from AI for investors and users is going to be over the long term. But like all of those things, there's a lot of enthusiasm early on, and which I think leads to, people may call it a hype cycle or whatever, but valuations get pushed up to reflect the enthusiasm, what's happening. And I think that's happening now. A lot of capital has flowed in, again, because the long-term potential is very, very real. So in some ways, it's a treacherous time for investors because...
Is it more treacherous? Because when you talk about, you're right, there's been past cycles, but the quantum of capital that's being invested in some of these companies dwarfs anything we've seen ever in the private markets.
Absolutely, and there's 3 or 4 concerns about it. One is that the amount of capital is being invested. It's very hard to pick winners and losers right now. And the thing that's different about this cycle versus the internet cycle is that the incumbents have a huge advantage because of the capital intensity of what has to be built. Number one, the ability to harness engineering talent. You can't do this with 3 engineers. You need a heck of a lot more than that. And the availability of data. So you start with the big guys having a tremendous edge. So if you're backing an attacker, like a venture capital firm would do, or a growth equity firm like General Atlantic, you've got to assess what is the impact of the big incumbents. I mean, whether it's Google or Meta, Amazon, Microsoft. I believe they have a big advantage. So I think we have to wait a bit. I think we're going to see some application companies come that will build on the infrastructure that's getting laid down now, and will be good investments. But you sort of need to be active but be patient at the same time.
I was curious to pick up on something you said at the beginning. You said this may be, of those 5 shifts from your career, 5 big tech shifts in your career, this might be the most significant. Do you think this is going to be the most significant?
I do, actually. I think it has the ability to more profoundly impact more industries. You think about healthcare, educations, 2 industries that have been hard to change through technology. I think AI has the ability to do that. And so I think it could be the most profound.
One thing that General Atlantic said, growth equity firm often invest in later stage private companies. Obviously, you have a lot of capital under management. You have not yet done one of these foundational LLM, OpenAI, Anthropic sorts of deals. Why not?
We have done one, actually, called Runway. Runway, which is basically doing an LLM for the creative industries, where they're trying to help advertising firms and creative departments internally build presentations, ad campaigns through a creatively oriented or vertical LLM. So we are doing a bit, but we haven't gone into the big ones. I think, again, it goes back to what I was saying before, capital intensity, valuation, and wanting to really have a better understanding of how do they fit vis-a-vis the big guys who are all coming at this in such a large way.
You, I am told, on your investment committee now have an AI on your investment committee. Is that correct?
We have a non-voting member of our 5-person investment committee. She's the 6th member. We call her Ada. And what she's done is look at 45 years of investment history, investment memos, deals we did, how they turned out, financial models, incorporating all that information. And think of it as a private LLM. I mean, we're using Llama as our third-party open source platform, but trying to use all that data to actually vote on our investments. We vote out all of our investments at our investment committee, and we ask Ada to vote as well, even though it's not an official vote.
Has Ada ever disagreed with the human voters?
Yes.
That's interesting. When that
not a lot. Not a lot.
Has Ada disagreed with you?
I don't know if she's disagreed with me, actually.
We're now learning what
that's
a
very good
question.
On, it's a very good question, actually. But there's a human factor in investing that Ada can't take into account.
If Ada disagreed with you, what would that? I guess
what would it look like?
What would it look like? But also be for you. Would you sit there and go, wait a minute, maybe I'm wrong, as opposed to if one of your partners did to be like, no, I know he's wrong.
No, I think all 5 of us take it seriously. What Ada, here's the thing: what Ada might do. Ada would say, when I look at your history, when I look at external data, I don't see margin expansion that's in the investment memo. I don't see margins going from 5% to 25% on that time frame in that industry in that structure. So I don't really believe it to the extent you guys are. Now we might be saying, yeah, but this entrepreneur is special, and I think they can do something, and the business may pivot to a different direction. Ada can't take that into account yet. It doesn't have the interaction with the individual. We can still do that. So when we differ, it's her saying, I don't like the market size relative to valuation. I don't like the margin expansion story. And so I'm flashing caution to you. And a lot of times we've hit those points. And I'd say 80, 90% of the time we're voting the same way. But there's a couple of times you say that human factor and what makes entrepreneurs special. We just sort of, in the conversation before about what they can do. You've got to factor that into your decision making.
Could you see in 10 years Ada having a vote, an actual vote?
Yeah, I could actually.
And you think LPs would be good? How would LPs, do you think, react to that, to finding out that they're in part funding, not funding, but they're investing in an algorithm?
Well, they want good decisions. I mean, at the end of the day, they want performance. And if I'd be the first to say, if Ada can do a better.
Do they get to cut their fees because now?
No way. No, come on, not that, Dan, don't go there. That's bad. But if we can make better decisions, right? Because of Ada, they're happy, but they can't cut their fees. No, we don't want to do that.
Let me actually ask about LP. Let me just go into something else a little. Actually, let me stick on one AI thing, and then we've got Chuck Robbins after this. I'm going to ask him too. A big announcement last night coming out of Washington about this $500 billion investment into U.S. data centers. I'm wondering, do you? When you think of that, A, what do you think that means for the startup environment? And B, do you think it's real or do you think it's an announcement? In other words, it's real work to build these things. It's not just flipping on an app. There's brick and mortar here.
I think the way to look at all of these announcements, including this very important one from last night, is that I think if you look at the large tech companies, put Oracle in the mix now, and SoftBank obviously has terrific insight and expertise, I think they're convinced this is real, that this AI transformation we're talking about is a fundamental change. It will rewrite technology, rewrite business and society to some level. And even though we might not have all the evidence yet, we've got to invest for the future now, and we've got to make that bet. And so you see people, the large incumbents, saying, we're going to put down large investments on the anticipation that this is going to be there. And yesterday was a great example of that.
And you guys, General Atlantic has investments on the data center side, on the infrastructure side. Do you feel you're now competing with the federal government on this?
I don't know if we're competing, but we have a digital infrastructure business.
Yeah.
We're doing it more outside the U.S. where we have real strength, and we're building data centers, digital infrastructure, and we're in conversations with all the large hyperscalers who want the capacity, and they're saying to us we were tripling the size of a data center business we have in Malaysia, for example, because ByteDance is saying to us we want more capacity for what they're doing in both their traditional TikTok business but also AI. And so we're going to participate in our own way selectively, but we're not going to try, going head to head with the big guys is probably not a formula for success for us.
I said I want to talk about LPs. Let me ask. The exit environment for private equity and for venture capital growth equity over the last couple of years has been sluggish, to say the least, in terms of both M&A and IPOs. And we talked about this a bit downstairs. So on the M&A side, there's been this argument that DOJ and FTC scared all the big guys off from making acquisitions. I get that. Why was the IPO market so slow when the public equity market was so strong?
I think you asked that question, and it's a great one, and it's a conundrum. But I really do think that this sense of overregulation from the SEC, even if it wasn't specifically targeted at the IPO market, caused entrepreneurs to hesitate about going public. And if you think about it, and we were talking about this, there's a lot of private capital available for companies to stay private longer. A lot of CEOs of private companies got comfortable with private ownership and saying, why do I want to subject myself to the rigors of the public market if I can wait a little bit longer? And they were getting and we were talking about, while not direct, the signals towards crypto, towards market structure coming out of the SEC was quite negative towards the private sector and quite negative towards markets. And it made it easy for companies, I think, to say, let's just wait and see. And so we had the three of the worst IPO years on record for the last 3 years now. We have 26 companies in our pipeline who are actively getting ready to go public. And again, as we were talking about briefly.
Do you believe they are all really, or do you believe some of the CEOs saying, GA says we should be, let's tell them we're getting ready to go public?
Well, I think there's a gentle hand on their back from a lot of private equity firms saying, we need to return capital to our investors. This is a partnership and work with us on this. But I really think I've thought a lot about this, and I think it really is a triple win, the IPO market, because number one, it allows companies to raise capital. They do need to raise capital. Yes, they can do it privately, but they can also do it publicly. Yeah. Second, it gives a chance for us to return capital to our investors. And what I love about the public market is people can make different decisions. Some can hold their investment, some can sell their investment. And the last thing is I think there's a real point about the public investors in the best growth companies. I mean, think of the public and being invested in Apple over the years, Amazon over the years, Google over the years, right?
All of which, of course, went public much younger than most of the companies that you're talking about, those 26, I'm guessing.
Absolutely. I mean, these are going to be much higher market caps at the time of the IPO than those companies were. But again, the public wants to participate in these stories. And I think this, it's a triple win if we actually get an IPO market moving again.
How much, you've been in this market for a while. How much of you're right, there's been a lot of private capital available. Obviously, certain founders don't want to go public. How much of this is almost to blame to the VC growth equity market in the sense of maybe 10 years ago, 15 years ago, you guys would have pushed a lot harder. Your reputation among founders, I don't mean GAs specifically, but the industries, was a lot harsher. Like, wow, they make us do things. I think of the old example when Sequoia Capital made Zappos sell to Amazon, and they didn't want to, and Tony didn't want to, and Mike Moritz's response was basically, that's fine, I can find another CEO. And we have the ability to do that. Did you guys become so founder friendly that it's actually hurt you?
Well, I think in general, the industry, it was more competitive. There was more capital. And that probably pushed the industry to be a bit more founder friendly in general, and I think also being a little bit more tolerant and saying, sure, you want to stay private a couple more years, we have capital for you, or you can find it from somebody else. I think that did happen. But I also like to remind the CEOs, while it's hard, there's a discipline of being a public company. And when we talk about getting our companies ready to go public, you think about building great governance on the board, you think about financial controls and reporting. You get better as a result of being prepared to go public and being a public company. But so I think we're encouraging them and saying, look, you're ready, you're at a scale, you're at a level of predictability where you should consider an IPO.
At World Economic Forum last year, General Atlantic announced a huge acquisition. You guys announced that you were buying Actis. I believe that was during this week last year.
Exactly.
Are you planning another? Could we see another major General Atlantic acquisition this year?
Well, I think you never say never, but I think we've got our hands full of what we have. We added Actis, which added digital infrastructure. We had a great comfort with them because we do a lot of investing outside the U.S. in places like now the Middle East, India, Southeast Asia, Latin America. They were very strong in those geographies. We had a comfort level with those geographies, so it lined up well. And we saw where the puck was going a bit on digital infrastructure. And these guys were good at one, they were strong in energy transition, building renewable resources. We know how important power is going to be to the whole equation. They're good at power. And second, they were good at digital infrastructure, towers, and data centers. Adding that into our mix, we thought was a real synergy, so we did it.
When you talk international, obviously GA has made, and we'll talk about ByteDance in a minute, has made investments in Chinese companies. A lot of U.S. VC firms that did that have kind of cleaved off their arms, in part because there was an executive order which determined or was going to stop certain sorts of investments, or at least risked certain investments. Are you still comfortable? Is General Atlantic comfortable investing in Chinese tech companies?
Well, we've been on the ground in China for 25 years. We've got a great team, and we've invested at Meituan, Alibaba, ByteDance. We've had a wonderful record in the tech sector, and we're still going to remain active there. Now, we have to be cognizant of a few things. More areas are off limits for investment from both the Chinese government perspective and U.S. government. So a lot of parts of the tech sector that we would normally like to engage with, where there's terrific entrepreneurship innovation, we won't have access to. So we'll be less active there just because the opportunity set got shrunk from what's available to us. But I think it's a mistake to write off the second biggest economy in the world. We know the level of innovation that's still happening in China. So we're going to still be active, but we have to realize the opportunity set's going to be more limited.
So let me ask TikTok ByteDance. Obviously, everything that's happened in the last couple of weeks. The law, the so-called ban law or the divestment law, passed 6 months ago, more than that, 7-8 months ago in the U.S. Why were there no conversations by ByteDance about divesting over the last 8 months? Why did it get to this boiling point? It seems like everybody just kept kicking the can until boom.
Well, one of the problems was we really did not have, the Biden administration really wasn't engaging with us on a real dialogue, because they were the ones to basically actually execute the law. And And
Although Congress didn't really give, the law doesn't give the executive all that much wiggle room. I mean, Trump arguably has broken the law by doing what he's done with the EO.
well, I don't know about that, but I do think that they were in charge of enforcing the law and working with us, and we were trying to get clarity. What is a qualified divestiture? What is a change of control? And we weren't getting the level of interaction with them, so it got pushed right to the end of the line here. And we were grateful for President Trump to intervene and basically say, wait a minute, 170 million people use this application every day.
Trump's the guy who started the ban process 4 years ago. Right? Same guy, right?
That would be true. That would be
just
true.
checking.
It is the same guy who's now a big TikTok fan.
Yes.
But I think he did see. I mean, to be fair to President Trump, he did see 170 million people using the system. He saw a lot of creators, a lot of e-commerce happening on the system, and said it would be a mistake for the U.S., which I firmly believe, for TikTok to be not available to U.S. users. And now we've got 75 days. Now it is a short period of time to figure out how can we conform with the law, meet the national security concerns of the United States, but keep TikTok available to the users.
Do you believe the Chinese that if a qualified offer came and it was a good deal and it comported with the law and it all worked, that ByteDance would be allowed to participate in that deal?
I think there's a lot of solutions short of a divestiture that actually can.
I mean, a partial divestiture, because that's what it is. It's basically the quote Chinese ownership has to come under a certain threshold, 20% threshold.
But don't forget, if you go up to ByteDance for a minute, 60% of ByteDance is owned by global investors.
Right, understood.
It is not a Chinese
right,
company.
which is why
per
it's
se.
got to get under 20% Chinese, correct?
Yeah. Well, I think there's ways to achieve that. And again, it's a little bit premature to talk about. We're waiting for Secretary Besson to be confirmed. He'll assume responsibility for CFIUS. Remember, we were still the whole crucible of how we were negotiating with the government was because of a CFIUS investigation of it, and so we'll be engaged. I think President Trump will deputize, Secretary Besant to be our partner in this, and we'll get on with it like as soon as maybe even as early as the end of the week in terms of negotiating what might work. And of course, you're right in saying, Dan, that it's a bilateral conversation, well, trilateral. It involves the Chinese government, the U.S. government, and the company and the board. All have to be involved in this conversation.
Do you believe a deal will get done?
Yes.
You do believe a deal will
Firmly,
get done?
yeah.
That's
I
interesting.
think it's in everybody's interest to get something done.
That's interesting. Let me ask about something else that happened. One of the other executive orders that came 2 days ago now, which was on offshore wind power. It's not a massive part of GA's portfolio, but you guys do have an offshore wind company in Europe, not in the United States. I'm curious, when you think about that, what are your thoughts about that executive order, given that you guys do invest in this area? You have a climate area, and as you said, the energy needs for all these data centers, which is all the AI, it's just continuing to grow.
Yeah, most of what Actis does on the energy transition renewable side is outside the U.S., so we are less directly subject to that. But it does apply, as you said, Dan, overall. I mean, our view is that the energy transition is going to continue. While we might be using more carbon-based energy longer than a lot of people might like, we still need more energy. I mean, AI just added to the demand. And if you go to the emerging markets, their need for energy is even more acute than it is in the developed market. Right. And so our ability to put any kind of capacity in place, renewable capacity, is going to be absorbed. And of course, the more we can power data centers with renewables, the better. Yep. And that's a big part of what we're trying to do. But I think the demand is there. I'm not that worried about it.
Is that, if you're thinking kind of big sector, how much does that impact you guys when you're making new investments right now? In the sense of when you watch a new administration come in and you see kind of the changing politics, how does that impact what you guys are thinking about new investments, not existing portfolio companies and potential exits, but what you're going into next?
It has a meaningful impact. I mean, right now we're about innovation and entrepreneurship around the world, and I think it's alive and well. We're finding great companies to invest in, and we take a long-term view. I mean, these are typically hold our investments 5 to 10 years. So, I mean, that's going to outlive many political cycles. So we think about that. But I mean, but look, we're sitting here and trying to fully understand the Trump policy agenda. It's going to have implications. We think on the good news front, I think from a regulatory point of view, you're going to see a rollback. That's going to help M&A. That's going to help the IPO market. That's important to us. But I think we're still in the assessment period of saying what does Trump, what are the Trump administration, what are their objectives going to mean for us as investors? I think it'll be net good, but we don't know yet. I'm
curious. 2 final questions for you. One, just to go back to AI, how we started this, to circle this around. Private equity has always been known as an apprenticeship business. Lots of people start very young there to do basic modeling, and they move up the stack and hopefully someday become you. If AI starts replacing a bunch of those lower level jobs, is there going to be someone to be CEO of General Atlantic in 20 years?
I hope not, but
you hope not.
Well, not AI. Well, I would just say this. I think like a lot of these inflection points in technology, people I think, become in some way over obsessed with displacement. But if you think about it, if we can replace 80% of the work that our associates and our vice presidents do that is somewhat drudgery, writing a first draft of investment memo, doing some of the if we can replace that, we move them to higher value added work. I mean, making more of the assessment of the entrepreneur, assessment of the market, assessment of the technology. Some of that can't be done by at least right now, by AI. So I think it will be in the mode of, yes, we're going to replace some form of the work that gets done in an investment process with AI, but there's be plenty of stuff to still do.
Yeah.
And so I think in a way it's net good. I mean, David Solomon said, I think this week, that 90% of the prospectus can be written by an AI, but the 10% that really tells the story is going to need human intervention.
I mentioned that to a Goldman banker here the other day, and I asked him the same fee question, and he wanted to get the hell away from that.
I do too.
Final quick question for you. How often do you get emails about people upset about their cars? Do they think you're the other Bill Ford?
No, I love it how often I get. I think I was actually with a meeting last week with a number of CEOs who were meeting with President Trump, and one of the CEOs of a tech company who I will not name came up to me and said, "We're doing a lot of work with your car company now. We're really excited about it." I said, "Different Bill Ford, no dividends, no cars. Sorry," that's happened. But there is, it's a longer story, but there's also the Ford Modeling Company run by Bill Ford, Eileen Ford's son. That's a better person to be confused with, actually. Anyway, I'm happy with this version, I guess.
Bill, thank you so much
Great,
for joining
thanks,
us.
Dan.
Appreciate
Thank you
it.
very much.